finish your follow-through, over your shoulder, finish by your opposite pocket, and dozens of other follow-through focused instructions are not helping your tennis. They're the equivalent of rolling a bowling ball and then leaning right and left to try to steer the ball towards the pins. Instead of trying to make the racket do something after contact, you should spend all of your time and effort doing the right things before contact. Let me explain. Hey, my name is Ian Westerman, and over the last 16 years, I've helped more than 1 million tennis players improve through my videos, podcasts, and top-rated book on Amazon. There are 4 distinct phases to all tennis shots. Phase number 1 is preparation. This is where we load, coil, and store energy with our body in preparation to be able to send it forward towards the ball. Phase number 2 is the forward swing. Now we start to uncoil and unload all of that energy in the direction of the point of contact so that we can deliver it into the ball. Phase 3 is physically touching the ball with the racket while all of that energy and momentum is traveling towards the point of contact. And this takes place over just 4 thousandths of a second. This video was recorded in 240 frames per second, which, if you do the math, means that each individual frame is actually exactly 4 thousandths of a second. So if you look at Roger here as he goes forwards to contact, if we go back in time 1 frame, he hasn't made contact yet. Forward 1 frame, now the ball is physically touching the strings. And then forward 1 more frame, the ball is already off the racket and traveling towards its intended target. So that leaves phase number 4, which is the follow-through. What is the purpose of the follow-through? One thing and one thing only, to allow the body and the racket to smoothly decelerate. The loading and the forward swing are for acceleration. Contact happens in just a tiny fraction of a blink of an eye, and in the remaining path of the racket, aka the follow-through, its only purpose is simply to allow the body and the racket to slow down. We can no longer influence or change anything about how or where the ball is traveling. Attempting to make the racket finish in a particular position, like over the shoulder or across by your opposite pocket, or anything else, really is like letting go of a bowling ball and then using body English to lean back and forth to try to influence the direction of the ball as it goes down the bowling lane. It's never going to work. We all kind of do it intuitively. It's kind of funny to watch people bowl and try to influence the ball. By the way, any idea where the term body English comes from? English is kind of slang for spin. I first heard it playing billiards with my grandpa when I was a little kid. I have no idea where that term comes from, but this is in essence what tennis players every day, millions of times, are trying to do with their racket. They hit the ball comes off the racket, and then they're trying to influence the ball after it's too late by forcing some kind of finish position to try to create spin or direction or some other kind of outcome. Here's a real-world example of that on the forehand side. Watch how this player is going to swing totally level and straight towards the ball, but then after contact, watch how her hand and her racket flips over to finish by her opposite pocket. To millions of tennis players around the world, that little flip right at the end here feels like we're adding topspin by flipping the racket over and twisting the racket face, trying to hit over the top of the ball. But guess what? There's not going to be any topspin on this forehand because the path of the racket as contact is being made is straight. It's flat. We cannot make spin with a flat racket path, and yet this player is trying to add spin after the fact by flipping the racket over and finishing by her opposite pocket. I like to call this type of finish a fake follow-through because what she's doing looks like topspin and it even feels like topspin, but it isn't actually doing anything. Kind of like how pickleball players think they're playing a sport, but we actually know the truth. Here's what racket English looks like on a one-handed backhand. Now this looks like a good finish for one-handed backhand, right? Everybody knows you're supposed to finish high with an extended arm and racket so that we can lift the ball and we can give it forward spin. Well, guess what? If we back up and look at the forward swing on this particular backhand, we'll see that the racket is actually traveling downwards to contact. His racket is starting here in this position, then traveling slightly down to hit the ball. You can see the path that the racket traveled here. So why in the world would the racket then, after contact, come upwards? Well, it's because he's been told by coaches over and over again that he needs to finish high in his one-handed backhand, but it doesn't match the direction of the momentum of his body or of his racket. It's just something that he's adding on after the fact, after hitting the ball with no topspin at all, with no lift at all. He's just finishing high because he knows he's supposed to finish high on a one-handed backhand. In both of these real-world examples, we have players that are using racket English in an attempt to do something to the ball, even though the ball is already gone and well on its way towards its target. They both set the racket in motion in one direction, hit the ball, and then change the direction of the racket after hitting it in an attempt to either finish their technique in a particular way or create spin or create lift or something else, but it's not actually helping their results at all. If you want to learn how to hit smooth, effortless, powerful forehands without forcing it or faking it, make sure to go to forehandpower.com, where I'll show you for free how to add 15 miles per hour to your forehand in just 15 minutes of practice following some super simple drills. It's completely free, so make sure to go sign up at forehandpower.com. Let's look at some elite world-class examples of different types of follow-through and why it's happening. It's not happening because they're just trying to follow through in a particular spot. It's a natural byproduct. So here's Jack Sock with a really extreme Western grip, finishing with his racket over by his opposite pocket. Now, why is that happening? As opposed to the other player we looked at previously, look at how he's got a tremendous amount of drop and lag with his racket head down below the point of contact, and all that loading of his forearm in his hand has to be released through the point of contact unless he just wants to be totally locked and rigid through the point of contact. The whole point of stretching his hand and his forearm is to then release it in an upward direction, and that creates a circular path with the tip of the racket, which brings the racket around and down next to his opposite hip. So this isn't happening because he's trying to make the racket do it. It's a natural byproduct of this circular energy that's releasing through the point of contact and then bringing the racket across and down by his left pocket. Sadly, Jack now plays professional pickleball, aka tennis for babies. Now, here's Jannik Sinner finishing with his hand and his racket up over his shoulder. Why is that happening? Well, unlike Jack Sock, he's not using a super extreme stretch and drop with his hands and his forearm. He doesn't have nearly as extreme of a grip either. And so he's got a smoother, more gradual lift and circular path with his racket. So after he hits the ball, all of that circular momentum and energy is continuing on the same path. It's not nearly as extreme of a flip of the racket head. So that circular upward path of the racket is naturally leading his arm and his hand and his racket up across to his left shoulder. If you copy this finish position without doing everything before contact that Jannik did, you're not going to make any more power or spin or lift because you haven't started the momentum of the racket in the right direction to begin with. Now let's look at a world-class one-handed backhand. Remember that finish from that everyday player? High with the racket extended, the arm extended up over the right shoulder. Well, how did Stan get to that position? Instead of coming down towards the ball, he's lifting upwards, rotating his body, and all of that circular rotation that's being unleashed through the point of contact just simply continues naturally in that upward direction. So he's finishing high and over his right shoulder as he unwinds as a natural byproduct of all the energy and momentum that he's released through the point of contact. He's not making the racket finish there because that's what a good one-handed backhand is. He's finishing there because it's just happening automatically and passively. He's not making it happen. If you want to hit all of these types of shots better, it's about fixing what happens before contact and then allowing what happens after contact to just happen on its own, passively. If you're not getting the power or the spin or the lift that you want, fixing your follow-through isn't going to change anything. Instead, what you need to do is adjust what's flawed before contact. Your preparation and your use of the kinetic chain isn't what it should be. Otherwise, your follow-through would just naturally finish in the right place. The more and more you make follow-throughs happen instead of let them happen, the more all 5 of these things are going to pop up in your game. First, your overall swing mechanics are going to get more rigid and tight and jerky. There's going to be hitches because you're manually changing the direction of the energy and momentum of your racket. When that happens, you're going to create less power because all of that tightness and tension in your body doesn't let the racket swing freely and produce the amount of energy through the point of contact that it should. That also leads to less spin. The more locked down your body gets, the less racket head speed you have, and the harder it is to create a smooth circular path like the pros we just saw. And so low to high motion becomes really tough when you get locked down and tight. You're also going to have less accuracy because as your body moves abruptly and in jerky directions back and forth, it's really tough to create accurate, repeatable swings. And finally, the more rigid your body is and the more you accelerate against that tightness and tension, the more you're going to have pain and injury. If you want to learn how to hit a smooth, effortless, powerful forehand that has a natural follow-through just like what we've been talking about instead of forcing it, go to forehandpower.com where I'll show you how to hit 15 miles per hour faster on your forehand in just 15 minutes of practice. Thanks so much for watching today. Hope this lesson was super helpful. I'll talk to you again next time.